The transport ships descended through the thin Martian atmosphere like falling stars, their hulls glowing red-hot against the rust-colored sky. Dr. Sarah Chun pressed her face against the viewport, watching the endless expanse of rocky terrain stretch out below them. 6 million humans were about to call this desolate place home, and the Galactic Council had given them exactly 30 standard days to establish basic settlements before the transport fleet departed forever. Beautiful view, isn't it? Marcus Rodriguez, the expedition's lead engineer, joined her at the window. His voice carried a hint of sarcasm, but Sarah detected something else underneath: determination. The Galactic Council had made their intentions clear during the evacuation proceedings on Earth. Humanity had grown too numerous, too unpredictable for their carefully ordered galaxy. The official statement called it a humanitarian relocation effort, but everyone knew the truth. This was exile, disguised as charity, a way to remove the troublesome humans from civilized space while maintaining the pretense of benevolence. Ambassador Kelthara of the Zenthri Empire had delivered the news with barely concealed satisfaction. Mars has been thoroughly surveyed, the crystalline being had announced, its voice resonating through multiple harmonic frequencies. The atmosphere is thin, but breathable with proper equipment. There are water deposits beneath the surface. Your species should be able to establish basic survival colonies within several decades, perhaps centuries. What the Council hadn't bothered to mention was that the water was buried under kilometers of permafrost, that the atmosphere contained barely enough oxygen to keep a mouse conscious, or that the temperature regularly dropped to minus 80 degrees Celsius during the Martian winter. They had essentially sentenced 6 million humans to a slow, grinding death by exposure and starvation. As the first wave of transport ships touched down in the designated landing zone, a vast plain that stretched to the horizon in every direction, Sarah felt the artificial gravity systems power down. The familiar weight of Earth's gravity was replaced by Mars's lighter pull, making every step feel like a small hop. Around her, thousands of refugees began gathering their meager possessions, preparing to step out onto a world that had never known the touch of rain or the whisper of wind through leaves. The airlocks hissed open, and the first humans set foot on Martian soil in generations. The last human expedition to Mars had been a small scientific outpost that lasted barely 2 years before supply issues forced an evacuation. Now, 6 million people were expected to not just survive, but thrive on this hostile rock floating in space. Captain Elizabeth Hartwell, the expedition's military coordinator, stood on a makeshift platform constructed from transport cargo containers. Her voice carried across the landing field through speakers mounted on the ships. "Citizens of the Mars colony," she announced, her words creating small puffs of vapor in the thin air, "we've been given 30 days to prove that humanity belongs among the stars. The Council expects us to fail. They've bet our lives on the assumption that we'll come crawling back to them, begging for rescue." A murmur ran through the crowd. Children pressed closer to their parents, while adults exchanged grim looks. Everyone understood the reality of their situation. Earth was no longer an option. The Council had made it clear that any ship attempting to return would be turned away at the border of human space. But they've made one critical error in their calculations, Captain Hartwell continued, her voice growing stronger. They've underestimated what humans can accomplish when survival depends on innovation. Our ancestors turned forests into farmland, carved cities from mountainsides, and built civilizations in the harshest corners of Earth. Mars may be hostile, but it's not Earth's ice age. It's not the depths of the ocean or the heart of a volcano. It's just another challenge, and humans have never met a challenge we couldn't overcome. Dr. James Park, the expedition's lead scientist, was already organizing survey teams to map the most promising locations for initial settlements. The data from orbital surveys had identified several areas where geothermal activity might provide natural heat sources, and underground water sensors had detected vast aquifers trapped beneath layers of frozen soil. "We need to think differently, Dr. Park explained to his team as they unloaded scanning equipment from the transport ships. "Traditional colonization assumes we'll start small and gradually expand over generations. We don't have that luxury. We need to go big immediately, or we won't survive the first Martian winter." The refugees weren't just desperate families fleeing a dying world. The Galactic Council selection process had been supposedly random, but the mix of people who had ended up on the transport ships suggested otherwise. There were doctors and engineers, scientists and farmers, teachers, and mechanics. It was as if someone had carefully chosen representatives from every field necessary to build a civilization from scratch. Maria Santos, an agricultural biologist, stood in the middle of what would become the colony's first farming district. The soil analysis reports were scattered around her feet, weighted down by small rocks to prevent the weak Martian wind from blowing them away. "The dirt is surprisingly rich in minerals," she told her assistant, a young man named David Kim who had studied xenobotany on Earth. "Iron oxide gives it that red color, but underneath there's nitrogen, phosphorus, even traces of organic compounds." David picked up a handful of Martian soil, letting it run through his fingers. "Do you really think we can grow food here?" "I think we don't have a choice," Maria replied. "But I've seen Earth plants adapt to worse conditions. Give me a greenhouse, some genetic modification equipment, and 6 months, and I'll have you eating fresh vegetables grown in Martian dirt." Across the landing field, construction teams were already assembling the first permanent structures. The transport ships had been designed with dual purposes. Once they landed, their cargo sections could be converted into modular building components. The hull plating became wall sections, the engine compartments transformed into power generation facilities, and the life support systems were repurposed to provide atmosphere processing for the growing settlement. Tom Bradley, a construction foreman who had spent 20 years building skyscrapers on Earth, supervised the assembly of what would become the colony's first residential district. "The gravity here is about 38% of Earth normal," he explained to his crew as they maneuvered a whole section into place. "That means we can build higher and wider than anything we ever attempted back home. A 10-story building here puts the same stress on the foundation as a 4-story building on Earth." The workers moved with practiced efficiency, their magnetic boots providing stable footing on the metal construction surfaces. Within hours, the skeleton of the first building was taking shape, its framework designed to withstand the temperature extremes and dust storms that regularly swept across the Martian surface. As the first day on Mars drew to a close, the refugees had managed to establish basic shelter for nearly a quarter of the population. The remaining 3/4 would sleep in the transport ships for a few more days while construction continued around the clock. The Martian day was slightly longer than Earth's, giving them an extra 37 minutes to work before the sun set behind the distant horizon. Dr. Chin found herself standing on a small hill overlooking the rapidly growing settlement. In just 12 hours, the empty plain had been transformed into a bustling construction site. Lights flickered on across the colony as the first power generators came online, powered by the same fusion reactors that had driven the transport ships across space. "It's actually happening," she murmured to herself, her breath forming small clouds in the cooling air. "We're really going to do this." Marcus Rodriguez joined her on the hill, carrying a thermal cup filled with coffee brewed from earth beans, one of the few luxuries the refugees had been allowed to bring. "The preliminary geological surveys are promising," he said, offering to share the coffee. "There's definitely water down there, more than the council's reports indicated. And the geothermal readings suggest we might be sitting on top of a volcanic system that could provide unlimited power." Sarah accepted the cup gratefully, savoring the familiar taste. "How long do you think it will take to access those resources? If we use traditional drilling methods?" "Years, maybe decades." Marcus grinned. "Good thing we're not planning to use traditional methods." Down in the colony, teams of engineers were already assembling the first automated mining systems. These weren't the slow, methodical extraction processes used on established worlds. They were emergency rapid deployment systems designed for exactly this kind of situation, fast, efficient, and capable of operating in extreme environments. The Galactic Council had assumed that humans would approach Mars colonization the same way other species had approached hostile world settlement, carefully, slowly, with meticulous planning and gradual expansion over multiple generations. What they hadn't considered was that humans had been forced to innovate under pressure since the dawn of their species. Every major human advancement in history had come from necessity, from the development of agriculture during ice ages to the creation of space travel in response to a dying planet. Dr. Angela Torres, the expedition's chief psychologist, moved through the settlement as darkness fell, checking on families and individuals who were struggling with the reality of their new situation. Many of the refugees were experiencing what she privately called displacement shock, the psychological trauma of being torn away from everything familiar and thrust into an environment that actively wanted to kill them. "It's normal to feel overwhelmed," she told a group of teenagers who had gathered around one of the heating units. "You just been through one of the most dramatic changes any human has ever experienced. But look around you. In one day, we've built shelter for 60,000 people. Tomorrow, we'll build shelter for 60,000 more. By the end of the week, everyone will have a warm, safe place to sleep." One of the teenagers, a girl named Lisa who had been studying art history on Earth, looked up at the alien stars visible through Mars's thin atmosphere. "Do you really think we can make this place livable?" Dr. Torres followed her gaze upward. The Martian sky was clearer than Earth's had been in decades, the lack of atmospheric pollution allowing starlight to shine with crystalline clarity. "I think humans have been making impossible places livable for our entire existence," she said. "This is just the latest challenge." As the first night on Mars settled over the colony, the refugees began to understand that they weren't just building homes, they were building a new world. The Galactic Council had given them 30 days to establish basic survival conditions, expecting them to beg for rescue long before the deadline arrived. Instead, the humans were approaching their exile with the same stubborn determination that had carried their species from caves to starships. In the communications center hastily established in one of the converted transport ships, Lieutenant Sarah Okafor monitored the quantum transmission arrays that connected the colony to the broader galaxy. Standard protocol required daily status reports to the Galactic Council, updates on population, resource consumption, and construction progress. The Council expected these reports to paint a picture of struggle, desperation, and gradual decline. Instead, the first day's report told a very different story. 6 million refugees had landed safely. Basic shelter was ahead of schedule. Resource extraction would begin within 48 hours. Population morale was surprisingly high despite the challenging conditions. Ambassador Kelthara's response came through the quantum array 6 hours later, the crystalline being's harmonic voice carrying overtones of confusion. "Please confirm population figures. Casualty reports appear to be missing from transmission." Lieutenant Okafor smiled as she composed her reply. "Confirmed. 0 casualties. All 6 million colonists accounted for and in good health." There was a long pause before the next transmission. Clarification requested. "How many humans are currently living in permanent structures?" "Approximately 1.5 million as of end of day 1, with full population housed expected by day 7. Another pause, longer this time. "Updates will be required daily. Council monitoring status closely." The transmission ended, and Okafor leaned back in her chair. She had been a communications officer in the Earth Defense Force before the evacuation, specializing in diplomatic transmissions. She knew how to read between the lines of official communications, and the subtext of the Council's messages was clear. They hadn't expected the human colony to survive its first week, much less show signs of rapid expansion. Outside the communications center, the sound of construction continued through the night. Human work crews had divided into rotating shifts, ensuring that building never stopped. Floodlights powered by portable fusion generators turned the construction sites into islands of brilliant illumination against the dark Martian landscape. The first day on Mars was ending, but it was also the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. 6 million humans had just proven that they could not only survive on a hostile world, but thrive in conditions that would have challenged the best efforts of any other known species. And they were just getting started. By the third day on Mars, the landscape around the landing site had been transformed beyond recognition. What had been an empty plain was now a sprawling metropolis of interconnected structures, each building rising higher than traditional construction would have allowed on Earth. The reduced gravity meant that materials could support far greater loads, and human engineers were taking full advantage of this physical reality. Dr. Park's geological survey teams had struck their first major breakthrough on day 2. Using seismic mapping technology adapted from earthquake research on Earth, they had located a massive underground water reservoir just 18 meters below the surface. More importantly, they had discovered that the water was liquid, kept from freezing by a network of geothermal vents that ran throughout the region. "This changes everything," Dr. Park announced to the colony's leadership council as they gathered in the newly constructed administrative center. The building was already the tallest structure on Mars, its 15 stories providing a commanding view of the growing settlement. "We're not just sitting on enough water to sustain 6 million people. We're sitting on enough water to sustain 60 million people." Captain Hartwell studied the geological survey reports, her experienced military mind immediately grasping the strategic implications. How fast can we access this reservoir? Marcus Rodriguez, who had been working with minimal sleep for 3 straight days, looked up from the engineering schematics spread across the table. Using conventional drilling equipment? 6 months, maybe longer. But I've been working on something different. He activated a holographic display that showed a 3-dimensional model of the proposed extraction system. Instead of traditional drilling, the design called for a series of controlled micro-explosions that would create a network of access tunnels down to the water table. We can adapt the mining charges we brought for mineral extraction, create a shaft network that will give us immediate access to the entire underground system. How immediate? Asked Dr. Santos, who had been waiting for guaranteed water access before beginning large-scale agricultural operations. If we start the controlled detonations tomorrow morning, we'll have water flowing by tomorrow evening. The speed of human adaptation to Mars was already causing confusion among the alien species monitoring the colony's progress. The Galactic Council had expected humans to approach colonization methodically, following the established patterns used by other species when settling new worlds. First, basic survival shelters would be erected. Then, over the course of several years, resource extraction would gradually begin. Finally, after a decade or more, permanent infrastructure could be constructed. Humans were completing this entire process in days rather than years. Construction Supervisor Bradley stood on the foundation of what would become the colony's first manufacturing complex. The building was designed to house the automated production systems that would transform raw Martian materials into everything the colony needed, from building components to clothing to electronics. The foundation pour is scheduled for later today, he told his foreman. Once that's complete, we can have the entire facility operational within 72 hours. The manufacturing complex represented a fundamental shift in how the colony approached resource management. Instead of importing everything they needed from Earth, which was no longer an option anyway, they would produce everything locally using materials extracted from Mars itself. The red planet was rich in iron, silicon, and aluminum, all essential components for industrial production. Young David Kim had been working alongside Dr. Santos in the agricultural sector, helping to establish the colony's first food production facilities. They had started with hydroponic gardens housed in pressurized greenhouses constructed from salvaged transport ship materials. The plants were Earth species that had been genetically modified to thrive in low-gravity, high-radiation environments. The tomatoes are already showing fruit development, David reported as he checked the nutrient levels in the hydroponic systems. And the wheat is growing faster than anything I've ever seen. It's like the reduced gravity is allowing the plants to put more energy into growth rather than structural support. Dr. Santos was documenting everything, creating detailed records of how Earth plants adapted to Martian conditions. We're not just growing food, she explained to the teams of agricultural workers who were expanding the greenhouse complex daily. We're creating a new ecosystem. Every plant we successfully adapt to Mars is a step toward making this planet truly habitable. The greenhouses were just the beginning of the agricultural revolution taking place on Mars. Teams of botanists and genetic engineers were working around the clock to modify Earth plants for optimal Martian growth. They were discovering that many species not only survive in the low-gravity environment, but actually thrived in ways that had been impossible on their home planet. Dr. Chun had been appointed as the colony's chief medical officer, responsible for monitoring the health and well-being of 6 million refugees adjusting to life on an alien world. Her medical facilities were expanding as rapidly as the rest of the colony, with fully equipped hospitals being constructed in each of the residential districts. The health statistics are remarkable, she reported to Captain Hartwell during their daily briefing. We expected to see respiratory problems from the thin atmosphere, bone density loss from the reduced gravity, psychological stress from the isolation. Instead, we're seeing improved cardiovascular health, increased muscle development, and psychological profiles that indicate high levels of satisfaction and purpose. Any theories about why the health outcomes are so positive? Dr. Chin pulled up a series of medical charts on her tablet. I think it's a combination of factors. The lower gravity reduces stress on joints and the cardiovascular system. The need to wear environmental suits for outside work has resulted in everyone getting optimal oxygen levels throughout the day. But I think the biggest factor is psychological. People know they're participating in something historic. They're not just surviving, they're building humanity's future. The psychological aspect of the Mars colony was indeed proving to be one of its greatest strengths. Unlike traditional refugee situations, where displaced populations often struggled with feelings of helplessness and dependency, the Mars colonists were engaged in meaningful work that directly impacted their survival and future prosperity. Every person on the planet understood that their individual efforts were essential to the success of the entire community. Dr. Torres had established psychological support centers in each residential district, staffed by counselors and therapists who specialized in helping people adapt to extreme life changes. But demand for these services was surprisingly low. Instead of seeking therapy for adjustment disorders, colonists were seeking additional training and responsibilities. They wanted to contribute more to the colony's rapid development. "I've never seen anything like it," Dr. Torres confided to Dr. Chun as they walked through the residential district after their shifts ended. "In refugee situations on Earth, we typically see depression, anxiety, and various stress-related disorders. Here, people are energized. They're excited about their future in a way that many of them hadn't been about their lives on Earth." The residential districts themselves were unlike anything that had ever been constructed. The reduced gravity allowed for building designs that would have been impossible on Earth, with apartments that featured soaring ceilings and open spaces that gave residents a sense of freedom and possibility. Windows were large and numerous, providing views of the Martian landscape that many colonists found surprisingly beautiful. Young Lisa, the art student who had been struggling with displacement shock during the first night, had emerged as one of the leaders in designing the colony's aesthetic elements. Working with a team of artists and designers, she was creating visual elements that helped transform the utilitarian buildings into spaces that felt like home. "Mars has its own beauty," she explained to a group of children who were helping her paint murals on the walls of the school that had just been completed. "The sunsets here are blue and green because of the atmospheric composition. The dust storms create patterns in the rock formations that look like abstract art. We're not trying to recreate Earth here. We're creating something new." The school itself represented another breakthrough in rapid colony development. Education had been a major concern for families with children. How do you maintain learning and development in a survival situation? The solution had been to integrate education directly into colony operations. Children attended classes in the morning and worked alongside adults in the afternoon, learning practical skills while contributing to colony development. The manufacturing complex came online on schedule, its automated systems beginning to produce everything from clothing to electronics using raw materials processed from Martian soil and rock. The sound of production lines running 24 hours a day became the industrial heartbeat of the growing colony. "Output reports are exceeding all projections," reported Janet Walsh, the manufacturing coordinator who had previously managed production facilities on Earth. "We're not just meeting the colony's needs for basic necessities. We're producing surplus goods that we can trade with other human settlements once this initial phase is complete." The idea of trade was already being discussed among the colony leadership. While Mars was currently isolated from the rest of human space by the Galactic Council's restrictions, those restrictions wouldn't last forever. When other human colonies were eventually established, Mars would be positioned as a major industrial and agricultural hub capable of supporting expansion throughout the solar system. Lieutenant Okafor's daily communications with the Galactic Council were becoming increasingly terse. The alien bureaucrats seemed unable to comprehend the rapid pace of human development on Mars, and their requests for additional information suggested growing concern about the implications of human success. Daily report, Day 5, she transmitted to the Council. Population remains stable at 6 million. Construction of permanent infrastructure 90% complete. Water extraction systems fully operational. Agricultural production beginning large-scale food output. Manufacturing facilities producing consumer goods at industrial levels. The response from Ambassador Kelthera came faster than usual. Clarification requested. Please confirm timeline. Are these achievements measured in standard galactic years? Negative. Timeline measured in Earth standard days. 5 days elapsed since initial landing. There was a very long pause. Council requests detailed documentation of construction methods and resource extraction processes. Lieutenant Okafor smiled as she composed her response. Documentation available for examination once colonial infrastructure development reaches stable operational status. Estimated completion, day 30. The communication ended abruptly, and Okafor suspected that the Galactic Council was holding emergency sessions to discuss the implications of human colonization success. They had expected Mars to serve as a prison planet where humans would struggle to survive in primitive conditions for generations. Instead, it was rapidly becoming a model of efficient colonial development that surpassed anything achieved by other galactic species. As the 5th day on Mars ended, the colony had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. 6 million refugees had not only survived transplantation to a hostile world, they had created a thriving civilization with industrial capacity, agricultural surplus, and quality of life that exceeded what many of them had experienced on Earth. Captain Hartwell stood in the observation deck of the administrative center, looking out over a city that glowed with artificial light against the Martian night. Construction continued around the clock, with work crews rotating in shifts to maintain constant progress. In the distance, the agricultural domes created pools of green light where thousands of plants were growing in carefully controlled environments. Status report, Captain, came Marcus Rodriguez's voice over the communication system. All systems operational, she replied. Population healthy and productive. Infrastructure development ahead of all projections. Water and power systems functioning at optimal capacity. And the Council? Captain Hartwell watched a transport shuttle launch from the newly constructed spaceport, carrying survey teams to explore potential locations for secondary colonies elsewhere on Mars. I think we're about to teach the galaxy that humans aren't just good at surviving impossible situations. We're good at turning impossible situations into opportunities. The shuttle disappeared into the dark Martian sky, its mission to identify sites for future expansion. In just 5 days, humans had proven that Mars wasn't a prison. It was the foundation for something much larger than anyone in the galaxy had imagined possible. The 10th day on Mars marked the beginning of what colonial historians would later call the acceleration phase, the period when human adaptation to their new world shifted from survival to expansion. The primary colony site now housed all 6 million refugees in permanent structures that provided not just shelter, but comfort. More remarkably, construction teams were breaking ground on 3 additional colony sites across Mars, each designed to support populations in the millions. Dr. Park's geological surveys had revealed that Mars was far more resource-rich than anyone had previously understood. The planet contained vast deposits of rare earth minerals that were becoming scarce on older human worlds, enormous reserves of fossil fuels trapped beneath polar ice caps, and geothermal energy sources that could power industrial operations for thousands of years. We're sitting on one of the most valuable pieces of real estate in the galaxy, Dr. Park announced to the expanded Colonial Council as they met in the conference center that had been completed just 2 days earlier. The preliminary estimates suggest that Mars contains enough lithium alone to supply battery manufacturing for the entire galactic economy for the next millennium. Commander Sarah Williams, who had been appointed to oversee expansion operations, studied the resource maps with the calculating eye of a strategic planner. How quickly can we establish extraction operations at these secondary sites? The infrastructure is already being prefabricated, replied Marcus Rodriguez, who had barely slept since arriving on Mars, but showed no signs of slowing down. We're not just building colonies anymore. We're building a planetary industrial network. Each new site will specialize in specific resource extraction and processing, with the entire planet functioning as an integrated economic system. The scope of human ambition on Mars was beginning to alarm other species in the Galactic Council. Intelligence reports indicated that several member species had requested emergency sessions to discuss the human expansion issue. The Council had intended to isolate humans on a single barren world. Instead, they had provided humans with a resource base that could support galactic-scale industrial operations. In the agricultural districts of the primary colony, Dr. Santos was overseeing the completion of the largest hydroponic farming complex ever constructed. The facility stretched for kilometers across the Martian surface, its transparent domes visible from orbit. Inside, Earth plants that had been adapted for Martian conditions were producing food surpluses that exceeded even the most optimistic projections. Crop yields are averaging 300% of Earth normal production, Dr. Santos reported to the Agricultural Council. The reduced gravity allows plants to grow larger without requiring additional structural support. The controlled environment eliminates weather-related crop loss, and the extended Martian day provides additional growing time. David Kim was documenting the genetic adaptations that were occurring in the transplanted Earth species. It's not just that the plants are growing better, he explained to a group of visiting botanists from the other colonies. They're evolving in real time to optimize for Martian conditions. We're witnessing speciation at an accelerated pace that would normally take millions of years. The agricultural success was creating opportunities that went far beyond simple food production. The massive oxygen output from growing plants was beginning to modify Mars's atmospheric composition in measurable ways. Computer models suggested that if agricultural expansion continued at the current pace, Mars would have a breathable atmosphere within 50 years rather than the centuries that terraforming experts had previously projected. Dr. Chun was monitoring the health impacts of rapid environmental change on the colonial population. What she was discovering challenged fundamental assumptions about human adaptation to alien environments. Bone density is actually increasing rather than decreasing, she reported to the medical council. The combination of reduced gravity and enhanced physical activity is producing stronger skeletal structures. Cardiovascular efficiency is improving across all age groups, and cognitive performance metrics are showing increases that suggest the brain is adapting to process information differently in the Martian environment. The medical data was particularly significant because it indicated that humans weren't just surviving on Mars. They were evolving into a subspecies optimized for life on the red planet. Children who had been born during the journey to Mars were showing developmental patterns that differed markedly from Earth normal growth curves. They were taller, stronger, and demonstrated enhanced spatial reasoning abilities that seemed linked to living in three-dimensional structures made possible by reduced gravity. Young Lisa had become the unofficial coordinator for what was being called the cultural renaissance occurring across the colonies. Art, music, literature, and entertainment were flourishing as colonists discovered that survival wasn't the only human need that required attention. We're not trying to preserve Earth culture, she explained to reporters from the colonial media network that had been established to document the transformation. We're creating something entirely new, a Martian culture that reflects who we're becoming as a species. The cultural developments were as rapid and innovative as the technological ones. Martian architecture was evolving its own aesthetic, taking advantage of the low gravity to create buildings that seemed to defy conventional engineering principles. Martian music incorporated the unique acoustic properties of the thin atmosphere, creating sounds that were impossible to produce on Earth. Martian literature explored themes of transformation, adaptation, and the infinite possibilities of human expansion across the galaxy. The manufacturing capabilities of the colonies had expanded beyond meeting internal needs to producing goods for export. The first trade missions to other human settlements in the outer solar system had returned with reports of eager demand for Martian manufactured products. The combination of abundant raw materials, advanced automation, and innovative design was producing goods that were both superior in quality and lower in cost than anything produced elsewhere. We're not just building a planetary economy, explained Janet Walsh as she oversaw the construction of the fifth major manufacturing complex. We're building the foundation for human economic dominance in this region of the galaxy. Within 10 years, Mars will be the industrial hub for dozens of star systems. The economic implications were staggering. Mars was positioned to become the wealthiest human world in history, with a per capita income that would exceed even the most prosperous Earth cities. More importantly, the wealth was being distributed equitably among the entire population. Every colonist held ownership shares in the planetary industrial complex, ensuring that the benefits of rapid development were shared by all. Lieutenant Okafor's communications with the Galactic Council had become increasingly formal and diplomatic. The Council's initial condescension had been replaced by barely concealed concern about the strategic implications of human success on Mars. Daily report, Day 12, she transmitted. Colonial population has established 4 permanent settlements with combined population of 6.2 million. Industrial production capacity now exceeds consumption needs by 400%. Agricultural output sufficient to support population of 20 million. First interplanetary trade missions completed successfully. Ambassador Kelthara's response reflected the growing alarm among Council species. Clarification requested regarding interplanetary trade. Has the Mars colony established unauthorized contact with external human populations? Negative. Trade conducted with authorized human settlements within Sol system. All activities consistent with original colonial charter provisions. Council requires detailed inspection of colonial facilities. Inspection team will arrive within standard galactic week. Lieutenant Okafor paused before responding. The Council's request for inspection was clearly an attempt to gather intelligence about human capabilities, possibly in preparation for additional restrictions or even military intervention. Colonial Administration welcomes Council inspection team. Standard diplomatic protocols will be observed. After ending the communication, Okafor immediately contacted Captain Hartwell to report the Council's intentions. The colonial leadership had been preparing for this possibility since the early days of the settlement. They had always known that human success on Mars would eventually provoke a response from the alien powers that had orchestrated their exile. How much time do we have? Captain Hartwell asked during the emergency leadership meeting. 7 days, maximum, Okafor replied. The Council inspection team will be traveling by standard diplomatic transport, which limits their speed. Commander Williams leaned forward. 7 days to prepare for visitors who are probably coming here to justify shutting us down or imposing restrictions that will cripple our development. Marcus Rodriguez activated a holographic display showing the current state of colonial infrastructure. The inspection team is going to see industrial capacity that exceeds what most Galactic Council member worlds have achieved after centuries of development. They're going to see agricultural systems that could feed half the galaxy. They're going to see humans thriving in conditions that would kill members of their own species. Dr. Park added his perspective. From a resource standpoint, we're sitting on wealth that could shift the balance of power in the entire galaxy. The Council has to be viewing Mars as a potential threat to their established order. Captain Hartwell considered the situation carefully. The Galactic Council had sent humans to Mars expecting them to fail. Instead, humans had succeeded beyond anyone's wildest imagination. The question now was whether the Council would allow that success to continue or would take action to contain it. Recommendations? She asked the assembled leadership. Dr. Torres spoke first. From a psychological perspective, we need to present ourselves as non-threatening while demonstrating our capabilities. Show them that we're not interested in challenging their authority, but that we're also not dependent on their approval. Dr. Chen added, the health and happiness metrics of our population are unprecedented in galactic colonial history. We should emphasize the humanitarian success of the Mars project. Commander Williams took a more direct approach. We should make it clear that any attempt to interfere with colonial operations will be met with appropriate resistance. We didn't come this far to be shut down by bureaucrats who are afraid of human potential. Captain Hartwell nodded thoughtfully. We'll prepare for the inspection with full transparency about our achievements, while making it clear that Mars is now a permanent human world. The Council may have sent us here as refugees, but we're staying as colonists. The next 7 days would prove crucial not just for the Mars colony, but for the future of human expansion across the galaxy. The Galactic Council inspection would determine whether humanity's transformation of Mars would be allowed to continue or whether other powers would attempt to limit human potential out of fear of what the species might accomplish when given the freedom to innovate. As Day 12 ended, the Mars colonies were no longer settlements struggling for survival. They were the foundation of a new chapter in human history, a chapter that would determine whether humanity would remain confined to the margins of galactic civilization or would emerge as a major power capable of shaping the future of intelligent life in the galaxy. The inspection team would arrive to find not the desperate refugees they expected, but the architects of something unprecedented in galactic history, a human world that had achieved in days what other species required centuries to accomplish. The Galactic Council inspection ship descended through Mars's atmosphere on the 19th day of human colonization, its sleek design gleaming against the rust-colored sky. Ambassador Kelthera stood at the observation deck, accompanied by representatives from 5 different alien species, each chosen for their expertise in evaluating colonial operations. What they saw as their ship approached the landing coordinates defied everything they had expected to find. The primary colony site had grown into a sprawling metropolis that stretched beyond the horizon. Towering structures reached skyward, their crystalline surfaces reflecting the alien sunlight in patterns that hurt the eyes to observe directly. Transportation networks crisscrossed the landscape, carrying people and goods between districts that specialized in different aspects of the colonial economy. Most shocking of all, the atmospheric readings showed oxygen levels that were 30% higher than they had been just 3 weeks earlier. Sensor readings must be malfunctioning, muttered Graztalk, the Thurlian representative whose species was considered the galaxy's foremost experts on planetary engineering. These atmospheric modifications would require decades of terraforming work. Ambassador Kel'Thuz's crystalline form vibrated at frequencies indicating deep confusion. Request updated scan of target location. Confirm human population numbers. The ship's artificial intelligence responded immediately. Scans confirm human population at 7.4 million individuals. Population growth rate suggests continued immigration from undisclosed sources. Impossible. All human transport vessels departed the Mars system 18 days ago. Correction. Population growth attributed to birth rate exceeding mortality rate by significant margin. Human reproductive activity appears to have increased substantially in the Martian environment. The inspection team exchanged glances that conveyed species-specific expressions of alarm. Not only had the human refugees survived their exile to Mars, they were reproducing at rates that suggested explosive population growth. Within a generation, the human population on Mars could reach numbers that would make them a significant demographic force in the galaxy. As their ship touched down at the designated landing pad, a structure that hadn't existed when they had departed Galactic Council space a week earlier, the inspection team prepared to encounter the desperate refugees they had expected to find. Instead, they were greeted by Captain Hartwell and a diplomatic reception committee that included representatives from every aspect of colonial society. "Welcome to Mars," Captain Hartwell announced as the inspection team descended from their ship. "We're honored to host the Galactic Council's inspection of our colonial development program." Ambassador Kel'Thuz emerged from the ship, its crystalline body adapting to the Martian atmosphere with visible effort. The other alien representatives required environmental suits to survive in the thin air, making them appear fragile and dependent while the humans moved freely in their adapted environment. The Council requires immediate assessment of colonial status and resource utilization, Ambassador Kel'Thuz announced, its harmonic voice carrying overtones of official authority. "Of course," Captain Hartwell replied pleasantly. "We've prepared a comprehensive tour of our facilities. I think you'll find our progress quite remarkable." The tour began with the agricultural districts, where Dr. Santos had prepared demonstrations of the hydroponic farming systems that were producing food surpluses capable of feeding populations far beyond the current colonial numbers. The alien inspection team observed in stunned silence as Earth plants that had been adapted for Martian conditions grew at rates that exceeded anything in their previous experience. "These growth rates are biologically impossible," stated Dr. Vexhal, the Andromedan botanist whose species had spent millennia perfecting agricultural science. "Plant metabolism cannot function at these efficiency levels." Dr. Santos smiled as she led the group through greenhouse complexes that stretched to the horizon. "We've discovered that Earth plants have remarkable adaptive capabilities when placed in optimal growing conditions. The reduced gravity allows for more efficient nutrient distribution. The controlled atmosphere eliminates environmental stress, and the extended Martian day provides additional photosynthesis time." David Kim demonstrated the genetic adaptation processes that were occurring in real time among the transplanted species. "We're not just growing Earth plants on Mars," he explained to the increasingly bewildered alien observers. "We're creating new species optimized for Martian conditions. The evolutionary process that normally takes millions of years is happening in weeks due to the selective pressure of the new environment." The manufacturing facilities were even more impressive. Janet Walsh escorted the inspection team through automated production lines that were churning out everything from consumer electronics to spacecraft components. The quality and sophistication of the manufactured goods exceeded what many Galactic Council species could produce with centuries of industrial development. "These production capabilities indicate advanced technological development," observed Theknor, the Rigelian industrial engineer whose species was renowned for their manufacturing expertise. "Human industrial science appears to have achieved breakthrough innovations. We prefer to think of it as practical problem-solving," Janet replied diplomatically. "When your survival depends on rapid industrial development, you tend to find innovative solutions quickly." The alien representatives were beginning to understand that they weren't observing a refugee settlement struggling for survival. They were witnessing the emergence of a new industrial and technological power that could potentially challenge the established order of galactic civilization. Dr. Chun provided medical data that demonstrated the remarkable health outcomes being achieved by the Martian population. Average life expectancy has increased by 12% compared to Earth norms, she reported to Dr. Zalvin, the vegan medical specialist who accompanied the inspection team. Cardiovascular disease is virtually non-existent, skeletal strength is increasing across all age groups, and cognitive performance metrics show improvement in 97% of the population. These health improvements suggest genetic modification. Dr. Zalvin observed its insectoid features expressing scientific curiosity. Has the human population undergone artificial genetic enhancement? No artificial modifications, Dr. Chen replied. What we're seeing is natural human adaptation to the Martian environment accelerated by optimal living conditions. Humans are remarkably adaptive when placed in environments that challenge their biological systems. The inspection team was escorted through residential districts where families lived in comfort that exceeded what most Galactic Council species enjoyed on their homeworlds. The architectural innovations made possible by reduced gravity had created living spaces that felt impossibly large and open compared to traditional colonial housing. Young Lisa guided the alien visitors through cultural centers where Martian art, music, and literature were flourishing. We're not trying to recreate Earth culture, she explained as they observed artists creating works that incorporated the unique aesthetic possibilities of the Martian environment. We're developing something new, a distinctly Martian approach to creative expression that reflects our adaptation to this world. The cultural achievements were perhaps the most disturbing aspect of human success from the alien perspective. Species that successfully adapted to new worlds typically experience cultural decline for generations, as survival took precedence over artistic pursuits. Humans were simultaneously achieving unprecedented survival success and cultural renaissance. Commander Williams demonstrated the defensive capabilities that had been integrated into the colonial infrastructure. While maintaining a diplomatic tone, she made it clear that the Mars colonies were prepared to defend themselves if threatened. Our security systems are designed to protect the colonial population from any potential hazards, she explained, activating displays that showed defensive installations capable of deterring attacks from significantly advanced military forces. The defensive preparations sent an unmistakable message to the inspection team. Humans had not only survived their exile to Mars, but had prepared for the possibility that other powers might attempt to interfere with their continued development. The colonies represented a potential military force that could complicate any future Galactic Council actions against human interests. Dr. Park's geological presentation provided the most alarming information of all. The resource surveys had revealed that Mars contained mineral wealth that exceeded the combined reserves of most Galactic Council member worlds. We've identified deposits of rare Earth elements, exotic materials, and energy sources that could support industrial operations for thousands of years, he explained to the increasingly silent alien observers. With the infrastructure we've developed and the resources we've identified, Mars has the capacity to become the industrial center for this entire region of the galaxy, Marcus Rodriguez added during his engineering briefing. We're not just building a colony, we're building the foundation for a new economic powerhouse. As the inspection tour concluded, Ambassador Kelthera requested a private meeting with Captain Hartwell and the colonial leadership. The conversation that followed would determine the future relationship between humanity and the galactic powers that had attempted to exile them to a barren world. The Council's expectations regarding human colonial development have been significantly exceeded, Ambassador Kelthera announced, its harmonic voice carrying overtones of barely concealed concern. We appreciate the Council's interest in our progress, Captain Hartwell replied diplomatically. We're proud of what the Mars colonies have accomplished. The scope of development observed here represents a potential destabilization factor for established galactic order, the ambassador continued. The Council requires assurance that human expansion will not interfere with existing territorial agreements or economic relationships. Commander Williams leaned forward. Are you suggesting that our success on Mars somehow threatens other species? Because I would respectfully point out that we didn't choose to be here. We were sent here by Council decision. The Council's intention was to provide humanitarian relocation assistance. Ambassador Kelthera responded, though the harmonic overtones suggested the statement was not entirely accurate. The expectation was that human populations would require extended support and guidance during the adaptation process. Dr. Torres spoke with the diplomatic precision of a trained psychologist. What I think the ambassador is indicating is that the council expected us to remain dependent on their assistance rather than developing independent capabilities. They're concerned that we become too successful too quickly. The room fell silent as the implications of the conversation became clear. The Galactic Council had not intended to help humanity establish a successful colony. They had intended to exile humans to a world where they would struggle indefinitely, remaining dependent on council assistance and unable to challenge existing power structures. What exactly is the council proposing? Captain Hartwell asked directly. Ambassador Kelthera's crystalline form shifted to patterns that indicated official pronouncement. The council recommends implementation of development oversight protocols to ensure sustainable colonial growth that aligns with galactic stability requirements. The euphemistic language couldn't disguise the real meaning. The Galactic Council wanted to impose restrictions that would limit human development and maintain their control over the Mars colonies. They had expected to find desperate refugees. Instead, they had found a new power that could potentially challenge their authority. Captain Hartwell exchanged glances with her leadership team before responding. The Mars colonies appreciate the Council's concern for galactic stability. However, we believe that our development has proceeded in accordance with all applicable laws and agreements. We see no reason to accept limitations on our continued progress. The meeting ended with diplomatic pleasantries that couldn't disguise the underlying tension. The Galactic Council inspection team had come to Mars expecting to find justification for imposing restrictions on struggling human refugees. Instead, they had discovered a thriving civilization that had achieved in 20 days what most species required centuries to accomplish. As the inspection ship prepared to depart on the 20th day of human colonization, Lieutenant Okafor monitored their communications to Galactic Headquarters. The reports being transmitted painted a picture of human achievement that would alarm every species in the Council. Mars was no longer an exile destination. It was the foundation for human emergence as a major galactic power. The inspection had ended, but the real test was just beginning. The Galactic Council now had to decide whether they would accept human success or would take more direct action to contain a species that had proven far more capable than anyone had anticipated. The 30th day dawned on Mars with a sunrise that painted the transformed landscape in shades of gold and orange that had never existed in the planet's ancient history. Where 30 days earlier there had been empty plains, a confederation of interconnected cities now stretched across the Martian surface, each one a testament to human ingenuity and determination. The atmosphere processors had been working continuously, and the air itself had changed, thicker, richer with oxygen, capable of supporting human life without environmental suits in many areas. Captain Hartwell stood on the observation deck of the Central Administrative Tower, a structure that rose nearly a kilometer into the Martian sky, made possible by the reduced gravity and advanced construction techniques developed specifically for their new world. Below her, 8 million human beings were beginning another day in a paradise they had built from nothing in just 1 month. The population growth had accelerated beyond all projections. Word of Mars's transformation had somehow reached human settlements throughout the outer solar system, and transport ships were arriving daily, carrying volunteers eager to join the most successful colonial venture in human history. The original 6 million refugees had become the founding population of what was rapidly emerging as humanity's most prosperous and technologically advanced world. Dr. Park's final geological report had confirmed what many had suspected. Mars contained enough rare minerals and energy resources to support a galactic-scale industrial empire. More importantly, human extraction and processing techniques had proven so efficient that they could supply materials to other worlds at costs that undercut established suppliers throughout the galaxy. Mars wasn't just successful. It was positioned to become the dominant economic force in the region. 30-day progress summary complete, reported Marcus Rodriguez as the leadership team gathered for their final meeting before submitting the completion report to the Galactic Council. Infrastructure development has exceeded all projections by factors ranging from 300 to 800%. Industrial capacity now sufficient to support a population of 50 million. Agricultural systems producing food surpluses that could feed 200 million. Atmospheric modification proceeding ahead of schedule, with breathable air expected planet-wide within 18 months. The achievements were staggering by any measure. In 30 days, humans had transformed Mars from a barren wasteland into a thriving world that exceeded the living standards of most established galactic civilizations. They had proven that human adaptability and innovation, when unleashed without bureaucratic restraint, could accomplish the impossible. Dr. Santos presented the agricultural statistics that were causing food prices to plummet throughout human space. Martian agricultural output has revolutionized farming science, she reported. We're producing crops that are more nutritious, more abundant, and more resistant to environmental stress than anything grown on Earth. The genetic adaptations we've achieved in just 1 month are being requested by agricultural scientists on dozens of worlds. The hydroponic complexes now covered thousands of square kilometers, their transparent domes visible from orbit as islands of green life on the red planet's surface. Inside, Earth plants that had adapted to Martian conditions were producing food that was superior in every measurable way to their original Earth counterparts. The plants were larger, more nutritious, and grew faster than anything in the previous history of human agriculture. David Kim had documented over 300 distinct genetic adaptations that had occurred naturally in the transplanted Earth species. We're not just growing Earth food on Mars, he explained to visiting agricultural experts from other worlds. We're creating new species that are optimized for controlled environments and reduced gravity. This isn't just successful colonization, it's directed evolution on a planetary scale. Dr. Chin's medical reports continued to show health improvements that challenged fundamental assumptions about human biology. The Martian population is not just healthier than Earth populations, she announced to the Colonial Medical Council. They're healthier than any human population in recorded history. Life expectancy has increased by 18%. Disease rates have dropped to near zero. Physical and cognitive performance continues to improve across all age groups. The health improvements were particularly dramatic among children and adolescents who had spent their entire time on Mars adapting to the new environment. These young people were taller, stronger, smarter, and more psychologically resilient than their Earth-born counterparts. They represented the first generation of true Martians, humans who had been shaped by life on the red planet into something remarkable. Dr. Torres had completed psychological evaluations that revealed unprecedented levels of satisfaction and purpose among the Martian population. We're seeing the lowest rates of depression, anxiety, and social dysfunction ever recorded in a human population, she reported. People aren't just surviving on Mars. They're thriving in ways that were impossible on Earth. The psychological success was attributed to several factors. Every person on Mars understood that their work directly contributed to the colony's success, creating a sense of purpose and meaning that had been rare in Earth's overcrowded cities. The reduced gravity and enhanced living spaces provided a physical sense of freedom and possibility. Most importantly, the rapid pace of achievement and expansion gave everyone confidence that they were participating in humanity's greatest adventure. Young Lisa had become the coordinator for what was now being called the Martian Cultural Renaissance, a flowering of art, music, literature, and philosophy that was attracting attention throughout human space. Martian culture isn't derivative of Earth culture, she explained to cultural anthropologists who were documenting the emergence of the first truly alien human society. It's something entirely new, a fusion of human creativity with the possibilities offered by life on another world. Martian architecture had developed its own aesthetic, taking advantage of reduced gravity to create buildings that seemed to float impossibly in the thin air. Martian music incorporated acoustic properties unique to the planet's atmosphere, creating sounds that could never be replicated elsewhere. Martian literature explored themes of transformation, adaptation, and the infinite potential of human expansion across the galaxy. The manufacturing sector had achieved outputs that were reshaping trade relationships throughout human space. Janet Walsh supervised production facilities that were operating at capacity levels that exceeded the industrial output of entire star systems. We're not just meeting Mars's needs, she reported to the Economic Council. We're producing surplus goods that are superior in quality and lower in cost than anything manufactured elsewhere. The economic implications were revolutionary. Mars was positioned to dominate manufacturing and resource extraction throughout the region, creating wealth that would make it the richest human world in history. More significantly, the Martian model of rapid colonial development was being studied by human settlements throughout the galaxy as a template for future expansion. Commander Williams had overseen the completion of defensive systems that ensured Mars could protect itself from any potential threats. Colonial defense capabilities are now sufficient to deter aggression from any likely source, she reported to the Security Council. Mars is no longer a vulnerable refugee settlement. It's a fortress world capable of defending human interests throughout the sector. The defensive preparations reflected the colonial leadership's understanding that success inevitably attracted attention from those who preferred the established order. The Galactic Council's inspection had made it clear that other powers viewed human achievement on Mars as a potential threat to their authority. The colonies had prepared accordingly. Lieutenant Okafor prepared the final communication to the Galactic Council, a report that would officially complete the 30-day evaluation period and establish Mars' status as a permanent human world. 30-day colonial development report complete, she transmitted. Population, 8.2 million and growing. Infrastructure, fully operational with expansion capability for populations exceeding 50 million. Industrial capacity, sufficient to support multiple star systems. Agricultural output, surplus production available for export. Defensive systems, operational and effective. The response from Ambassador Kelthara came after a delay that suggested extensive consultation with Council leadership. Colonial Development Report received and reviewed. Council requests extended diplomatic dialogue regarding long-term arrangements for human presence on Mars. Mars Colonial Administration welcomes diplomatic dialogue with Galactic Council, Lieutenant Okafor replied. However, Mars is now established as permanent human territory with full sovereign rights. Future discussions will proceed on that basis. The communication represented a fundamental shift in the relationship between humanity and the alien powers that had exiled them to Mars. The humans were no longer refugees seeking assistance. They were representatives of a new galactic power that had proven capable of achievements that challenged the established order. Captain Hartwell gathered the colonial leadership for a final meeting in the conference center that overlooked the sprawling metropolis they had built in just 30 days. Status report, she requested. All systems operational and expanding, Marcus Rodriguez replied. Construction of secondary colonies proceeding ahead of schedule. Resource extraction operations establishing Mars as the primary supplier for multiple star systems. Infrastructure capacity sufficient for populations in the hundreds of millions. Population growth rates accelerating, Dr. Chen added. Immigration from other human worlds increasing daily. Birth rates suggesting natural population doubling within 5 years. Cultural and educational systems establishing Mars as a center of human intellectual development, Dr. Torres contributed. Universities being established. Research facilities attracting scientists from throughout human space. Economic output positioning Mars as the dominant trade center for the region, Janet Walsh reported. Manufacturing capabilities exceeding established galactic powers. Defensive systems sufficient to guarantee territorial integrity, Commander Williams concluded. Mars is now a sovereign human world capable of defending itself and supporting further expansion. Captain Hartwell nodded as she processed the reports. In 30 days, 6 million human refugees had built something unprecedented in galactic history. A world that combined unprecedented prosperity with technological advancement, cultural renaissance, and military capability. They had proven that human potential, when unleashed without restriction, could achieve what other species considered impossible. Recommendations for Phase 2 operations? She asked. Expansion to additional worlds in the Martian system, Commander Williams suggested. Establishment of trade relationships with independent systems. Development of exploration capabilities for expansion beyond Sol system. Agreed, Captain Hartwell replied. Mars was supposed to be humanity's prison. Instead, it's become the foundation for something much larger. As the 30th day ended, the transformation of Mars was complete. The red planet had become a blue-green world where human civilization flourished beyond the wildest dreams of those who had first set foot on its surface just 1 month earlier. The Galactic Council had sent 6 million refugees to a barren world, expecting them to struggle for survival. Instead, they had created the foundation for human emergence as a major galactic power. The lights of 8 million humans illuminated the Martian night, each point of light representing a person who understood they were participants in humanity's greatest achievement. They had proven that when human ingenuity and determination were combined with the freedom to innovate without restriction, there was no challenge too great, no environment too hostile, no obstacle too formidable. Mars was no longer humanity's exile. It was humanity's launch pad to the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same.